Algeria has condemned in its strongest terms the Israeli occupying authorities' policies and practices against the Palestinian people, notably the use of starvation against the inhabitants of Gaza. The Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has sworn that the refusal by the Israeli occupying authorities to halt its military aggression on Gaza is part of a broader strategy aimed at continuing the genocide and the war of starvation. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed serious concern over the continued deterioration of the situation in the occupied Sahrawi territories. Hello and welcome on Radio Algeria International. I'm Mariam Bershi. Algeria has condemned in the strongest terms the Zionist entity's policies and practices against the Palestinian people, notably the use of starvation against the inhabitants of the Gaza Strip as part of the genocidal war waged in this part of the occupied Palestinian territories. Asya Bikar has more.
The Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs highlighted that in an extremely serious declaration, the first in the history of the Palestinian issue and in the history of the entire Middle East region, the United Nations officially declared a state of famine in the Gaza Strip on Friday. The statement added that what is even more serious is that this clearly observed state of famine is not dictated by a force majeure, but is in fact a political choice and the result of the planning of the Israeli occupation, emphasizing that the declared state of famine is related to the displacement project, the project of reoccupying Gaza, and even implementing the so-called Greater Israel project. Algeria strongly condemns these policies and practices imposed on the Palestinian people, notably the genocidal war waged in Gaza, and calls on the international community, particularly the UN Security Council, to assume its responsibilities in the collective action required to cancel the Greater Israel project and preserve the viability of the two-state solution as the basis for any just, lasting and definitive settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Algeria, as a member of the Security Council, reaffirms its commitment to continue its diplomatic efforts aimed at supporting the Palestinian people and working to end this unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe and accelerate the creation of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital.
8 people, including a child, have died in the Gaza Strip in the past 24 hours due to famine and severe malnutrition as the humanitarian catastrophe deepens under continued Israeli siege. The death toll from starvation and malnutrition across the Gaza Strip has now reached 289, including 115 children. Meanwhile, 3 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes targeting 2 locations in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. This brings the number of victims of ongoing Israeli aggression on Gaza since October 2023 to at least 62,622 documented Palestinian fatalities, with over 157,673 others injured. Thousands of victims are feared trapped under rubble, inaccessible to emergency and civil defense teams due to Israeli attacks. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation said that the United Nations official declaration of famine in the Gaza Strip is a global warning of a war crime that requires urgent international action. The organization stressed that the declaration of famine is a global warning of a humanitarian, political and legal crime that requires urgent and unprecedented international action, and called for the activation of all international emergency mechanisms to ensure the immediate, safe and unhindered flow of humanitarian and food aid to save the lives of civilians trapped in the Gaza Strip. The organization also stressed the need to refer the file on the crimes of siege and deliberate starvation committed by the occupation and the resulting famine in Gaza to the International Criminal Court. The spokesman for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, Nabil Abu Rodaina, has warned that the refusal by the Israeli occupying authorities to halt its military aggression on Gaza is part of a broader strategy aimed at continuing the genocide and the war of starvation to forcibly displace the Palestinian people. More details in this report by Jamal Salmani.
The Palestinian official Nabil Abu Rodaina said the occupation is deliberately ignoring international calls for a ceasefire, while pressing ahead with policies that violate international law and UN resolutions, from pursuing displacement policies in Gaza to accelerating settlement expansion and settler violence across the West Bank. He cited recent developments in the village of El Mughayyir, where the Israeli occupying forces destroyed property and allowed settler violence to escalate unchecked as part of a broader campaign seen in Jenin, Tulkarem, and other Palestinian areas. The presidential spokesperson urged the U.S. administration to take responsibility, warning that continued American silence could fuel chaos throughout the entire region. Abu Rudaina called on the international community to take serious and immediate action in response to Israel's disregard for international legitimacy and law, stressing that widespread condemnations, including those from the United Nations and global leaders, must now be translated into concrete pressure. He concluded that it is time to act to stop this war before it's too late, urging a decisive global stance to end Israel's campaign of starvation and collective punishment.
Many cities and capitals around the world witnessed mass demonstrations over the weekend condemning the ongoing Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip and demanding an end to it and the delivery of aid to the besieged Strip. Thousands of people participated in demonstrations organized in the British capital London, the Norwegian capital Oslo, the Syrian capital Damascus, the South Korean capital Seoul, the Danish city of Aarhus, Istanbul, Sweden's Helsingborg, and the capital Stockholm in support of the Palestinian people and to demand a ceasefire and the delivery of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. The participants in the demonstrations raised Palestinian flags and banners condemning the crimes committed by the Zionist occupation against the Palestinian people. The participants called for an end to double standards and for the occupation to be tried for its massacres against the Palestinian people, especially children, and denounced the genocide in the Gaza Strip. Tens of thousands of people marched in cities across Australia today in the largest pro-Palestinian demonstrations in the country's history. The nationwide rallies came days after the UN-backed famine review declared that parts of Gaza had officially entered Phase 5 famine, the most severe level of food insecurity, with conditions expected to worsen in the coming weeks. Demonstrations were held in around 40 cities and towns nationwide, with the support of over 250 community organisations and unions, including the Victorian Trades Hall Council, unions NSW, Unions WA, Hunters Walkers, and South Coast Labour Council. Organisers framed the day of action as a response to the escalating humanitarian crisis in Gaza and called for immediate political action, including sanctions and an end to Australia's military ties with Israel. Many speakers also condemned the ongoing Israeli genocide and the starvation of innocent civilians in Gaza. The United Nations has warned that Yemen is braced for the worsening hunger crisis, which is set to begin in September 2025 amid the continuation of a severe funding shortfall this year. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, said that 52% of the population in Yemen will face acute hunger starting in September and are in urgent need of humanitarian food assistance. The statement further added that 41,000 people will experience catastrophic levels of food insecurity equivalent to famine. At least 1 in every 5 households in Yemen will face an almost total lack of food and other basic necessities, placing them at heightened risk of death from hunger. It's called for urgent support to enable immediate action to prevent the worsening of the food insecurity crisis and the spread of famine in Yemen, notably in high-risk areas. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed his serious concern over the continued deterioration of the situation in the occupied Sahrawi territories due to the ongoing human rights violations by the Moroccan occupation in the region. Simultaneously, he expressed the possibility of reaching a just and lasting political solution acceptable to both parties that guarantees the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. Asya Bakar reports.
In a report on the question of Western Sahara published on Saturday, Guterres pointed out that the Moroccan occupier continues to refuse entry to the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights mission into the occupied Sahrawi territory since 2015, despite its repeated requests to visit the area in accordance with UN Security Council resolutions, the latest being Resolution 2756. He stressed that the absence of independent, impartial, comprehensive and sustained human rights monitoring in the occupied Sahrawi territories remains a major obstacle to a full assessment of the situation, noting that reports indicate international observers continue to face entry restrictions, with dozens being denied entry or expelled during the reporting period. He also referred to violations by the occupation against 79 Sahrawi activists, as well as those related to so-called coastal development projects involving land seizures, destruction of private property and displacement. Speaking about the imprisoned Sahrawis from the Igday Music group who are serving long prison sentences, Guterres affirmed that the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention in a November 2024 report noted that the government of Morocco has taken no action to implement its opinion and that detention conditions have deteriorated, including isolation, limited family communication and restricted access to medical services. Guterres added that the High Commissioner also received reports of similar violations against other Sahrawi detainees, including discriminatory treatment, with reports of at least one death in custody, in addition to reports of a shrinking civic space and restrictions on the rights of Sahrawis to freedom of expression, association and peaceful assembly. Reports indicated that the Moroccan occupation forces suppressed protests and events supporting self-determination, particularly targeting Sahrawi women human rights defenders. Faced with these facts, Guterres renewed his call to work towards changing course without delay, facilitated by the United Nations and supported by the international community at large, to achieve a just and lasting political solution acceptable to both parties, namely Morocco and the Polisario Front.
Let's note that the report of the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is expected to be presented during the 80th session or 80th Ordinary Session of the UN General Assembly, scheduled for next September. The Secretary-General of the General Union of Sahrawi Workers, Nafhi Ahmed Mohammed, has called on African unions to sue companies involved in the plundering of Sahrawi natural resources in their countries. In his closing remarks at the 46th session of the General Council of African Trade Union Unity held in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, Mr. Nafhi urged African unions to comply with the requirements of international law and contribute to the implementation of court decisions, of all which nullify any exploitation of these resources without the consent of the Sahrawi people. Mr. Nafhi Ahmed Mohammed also uncovered developments in the Sahrawi issue and the Moroccan occupation's maneuvers to deprive the Sahrawi people of their right to self-determination, plunder their resources and violate human rights. Earlier, the American Global Monitoring Center in New York City organized an international symposium entitled Morocco's Occupation of Western Sahara as a Threat to Regional and International Peace and Security, with the participation of experts and researchers on the issue of Western Sahara and related regional and international affairs. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has accused Western countries of seeking to prevent peace negotiations with Ukraine at a time when diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict are stalling. Mr. Lavrov said in an interview with the state television channel Russia that Western countries are merely looking for a pretext to prevent negotiations. And in economy, Algeria is taking part in the International Agriculture and Food Fair Agra 2025 in Gornja Radgona, Slovenia, until August 28th, with more than 15 pioneering Algerian companies. Jemison Mani reports.
Algeria's participation aims to strengthen its economic partnership with Slovenia, built on the privileged and long-standing relations established during the official visit of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, in Slovenia. The ministry stressed that the event is a strategic step towards promoting bilateral cooperation and opening up new prospects for Algerian products, thus reflecting the common political will between the two countries to forge balanced and sustainable economic partnerships. The Algerian booth was visited since the opening by a large number of Slovenian visitors who have shown great interest in the Algerian products on display, demonstrating the attractiveness and competitiveness of Algerian products in European markets. Every year, the world's leading brands of agricultural and forestry machinery and food processing equipment, as well as smaller companies involved in the agri-food sector, are presented in one place. In addition to a wide range of machinery and equipment, Agra also offers top-quality products.
With that last piece of news comes the end of our news bulletin. Stay tuned on Radio Algeria International.
The Kingdom of Banu Ifran existed in Algeria from 1790 AD to 1068 AD, and the city known today as Tlemcen was the capital. It was ruled by a Berber tribe known as the Ifrani dynasty, which was also referred to Banu Ifran. They were a very significant tribe during the early Islamic and pre-Islamic times in the country. The tribe is especially noted for their role as brave and courageous warriors that fought with other tribes to protect their land against corruption and foreign invaders. The tribe's heroism and eagerness to aid various other tribes in the common goal to fight off invasion is legendary, such as during the 7th century to ward off the Umayyad, the Arab Umayyad during the 8th century, and opposing numerous dynasties, including the Fatimids and Zirids in the 10th century. They are also recognized as the only dynasty that was prepared to step in and protect the people of Maghreb. There were 4 notable tribes in the Zenata Confederation, of which the Banu Ifran was one of the major communities. As a tribe that specialized in warfare and cavalry, they were continuously called upon to assist in revolts. The Justinian reigned between the years of 547 and 550. Armed forces of the Banu Ifran took it upon themselves and provoked the Byzantine into a war. Tlemcen was rebuilt by the Banu Ifran chief Abu Qurra in 765, and in 945 they joined forces in the Maghrawa tribe to fight off the Egyptian Fatimids. The Fatimids decided to regroup and retaliate, destroying the city of Ifghan that was constructed by Yala ibn Muhammad. The Banu Ifran once again survived by going back to their nomadic roots, but in the 11th century they again assisted the Maghrawa, who eventually won Fez in 993. Fez was recaptured in 1033, but the Maghrawa fought back again from 1038 to 1040, taking back control of Fez. The Almoravids eventually came into power and destroyed both the tribes of Maghrawa and Banu Ifran. Before Islam was introduced to the Banu Ifran, they placed great emphasis on myths, rites, and the appeasing of gods and goddesses. It is believed that after 711, the tribe gradually became converted to accept Islam as a religion, and most were believers and practitioners of Islam. In a period of North African history during which dynasties rose and fell, overlapped one another, or the strong displaced those less strong, the Hammadids ruled an area now known as northeastern Algeria for around 1.5 centuries, from 1008 to 1152. This Berber dynasty rose to power under Hamad ibn Bulughin, who had been given authority over central Maghreb. Soon after becoming the leader of this portion of the Maghreb, a historical region covering Morocco, Algeria, Libya, Tunisia, Mauritania, and Western Sahara, Hamad ibn Bulughin declared himself independent of Zirid dynasty, which at the time ruled the portion of the Maghreb stretching from Morocco to Tunisia. The Zirids sent an army to attempt to force the Hammadids, to conform, but Hamad ibn Bulughin had already obtained recognition of his independence from the Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad. Consequently, a peace treaty was agreed upon between the Zirid and Hammadid dynasties, with the Zirids recognizing the Hammadids as being the legitimate dynasty in 1018. The Hammadids followed the Maliki form of religious law with Sunni Islam and spoke classical Arabic and Berber, as well as an Indo-European dialect known as Mozarabic. With the dispute between the two dynasties settled, Hamad founded a fortified city in the mountains northeast of Nsila. The ruins of the Bani Hamad fort remain standing today and are noted as an authentic example of a fortified Muslim city on UNESCO's list of World Heritage Sites. Excavation of the site has unearthed jewelry, coins, ceramics, and other items which archaeologists believe indicate that the Hammadid dynasty was socially advanced. The Hammadids were obliged to move their capital when a confederation of Arab Bedouin tribes known as Banu Hilal invaded the area, reportedly spurred on by the Fatimid caliphs of Egypt, who were rivals of the Abbasid caliphs. The Hammadids settled on the Mediterranean coast of the Gulf of Bijaya. With its strategic position on the coast, Bijaya became one of the most prosperous cities on the Mediterranean in the 11th century, following a succession of rulers, with the last one being Yahya ibn Abdulaziz from 1121 to 1152. The Hammadids were conquered by the Berber Muslim Al-Muhad dynasty and ceased to exist.
The province of Tiaret, northwestern Algeria, has been inhabited since ancient times. There are numerous megalithic monuments. The site of the town was originally a Roman station. The Jadars' tombs near Tahert or Tiaret are evidence that the province was inhabited from at least the 5th century by a tribe or tribes that could build in stone. From 933 was administered as part of the Sultanate of Tlemcen, and in the 16th century fell to the Turks. In 1843 it fell to the French after the French defeated the hero Emir Abdelkader. In 1962 Algeria regained its independence after the bloody Algerian War of Independence. Hamid Baroudi was born in Tiaret, considered an undisputed master of ethno-pop, multicultural Algerian ambassador, singer, one of the pioneers of the world music, and a reference of the North African music. Hamid Baroudi is an artist whose music is an amazing mixture of nomadic cross-cultural influences. From his Algerian roots, he is able to effortlessly throw his cultivated vocals across Brazilian sambas, African makossa, or moody North African gnawa trance, while being propelled forward by an intricate mix of funky dance rhythms. He has the ability to build sound patterns with a mix of instruments and vocals, creating a new music direction in the world music. Hamid Baroudi grew up with music in Algeria and made his stage debut at the age of 13 in his home city of Tiaret. Music is far more than just entertainment in Algeria. It is regarded as a vehicle for purposes such as hope against oppression, shared solidarity, and spirituality. His first Algerian band, Les Emirs, was the beginning of a long musical adventure. In the 80s, Hamid experimented with his school band Triangle, the first world music sound long before Rai music. Tegdemt was his third Algerian band, a hard musical outfit, and Hamid himself a regilding and charismatic stage force. Baroudi moved to France when he was a teenager but settled in Germany later when he sought to study art in the Documenta city of Kassel. At that time, Baroudi has made a huge reputation of himself as musical innovator, dynamic performer, and social activist, first as a lead singer of the German experimental group Dissidenten, where he brought his North African heritage with him to experiment with the band during 6 long years. In 1991, he performed in a festival against the 1991 Gulf War held in Bonn, Germany, before a staggering 200,000 strong audience, where he sang his biggest hit, Caravan to Baghdad. Baroudi has since become an ambassador not only for North African music, but for the world's different religions and cultures. In keeping with the spirit of his first album, which he valiantly offered to everyone who hopes to live in a world without any racism, fanaticism, violence, war, or borders. His songs are indeed protest songs, but his protest is against oppression. That's why the North African press declared him as the most important protest artist of the 90s. Hamid has been showered with praises for his music just about everywhere he goes.